Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting of the Ordinance Committee to order, this being Tuesday, October 8th at 6:30. I have with me Councilors Anderson Burgos and Councilor Murphy, and I'm Councilor Linda Vacant, and we also have in the chambers with us Councilor McGivern. We have a couple folks in the chambers who have items on the agenda, so I'd entertain a motion to go out of order to take up item 4.
Make a motion, we move to item 4.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
So item 4 is Holyoke City Council street vendor license application for Mr. Charles Theocles to operate a food cart at location to be determined. So Mr. Theocles, if you could come up to the microphone and make sure that it's on, and give us your name and address, and I'll try to get the pronunciation right at least once tonight. And then if you would like to just explain to us where you would like to have this food cart and what your proposal involves, that would be great.
Perfect. I'm not sure about the
I don't think that mic's on.
Can you make sure the button on the side is up or down? There.
Okay, is that better?
Very good.
That's better.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'll stand back here then.
Okay.
I see familiar faces. Basically, I'm not sure about the absolute location in Holyoke. I have several that I have contemplated. One just coming off of 391.
Okay, so for purposes of tonight, not
Okay,
to
yep.
interrupt you, but you need to give us a specific location.
Okay, that's,
So
I've got a state hacker's license, which apparently, according to the DPW, allows me basically to go wherever I am supposed to be able to go, according to them, since they have a liability policy, which they had me take out
Okay.
for wherever we might be operating. So my understanding is that we can go basically anywhere other than, trying to obstruct traffic and that kind of stuff. But my interest is really going on to private locations, as I said, like the gas station that's at the end of 391 coming onto High Street, A&A, that's one. And it may be others like that, but I've been told by, I'm trying to think of her name, not only Amy, the girl in, I forgot her name.
What department?
Yes, which
Good
department
question.
let you know that you needed a special permit?
Pardon?
Which department let you know that you needed to come before us for the vendor?
It was the clerk's office, which I started with, and they're downstairs. I'm trying to think of her first name, not Amy, but Amy's at DPW. Jane.
License?
Forgot her last name.
Champagne?
Yes, thank you.
License.
Don't get old. The memory goes first.
I'm already past you.
I don't think so. I think I might have some years on you, young man.
Well, maybe we
So-
can help you out a little bit, because typically when these come before us, it's because somebody wants to have their food cart on a city area.
Okay.
So if
okay.
you have any of those in mind,
Okay, so my understanding is from Jane and from Amy at DPW that and because I have a state hawker's license, I won't be hacking. That's for the that's for the politicians to do. My understanding is that we can go basically anywhere with this state license that's acceptable to the municipality that we're operating in. In other words, there might be a street location, there's certainly going to be private locations,
right?
which I prefer actually. So being assigned an area is not the way I was explained to be located at.
Okay, so we will not be assigning you an area. But in order to recommend granting you anything to the city council, because we would not be involved with private property,
Right, correct.
we would need to understand from you if there is a city street location that
Okay.
you would wish to be licensed for, or an area,
I'm
or
not,
a block.
I'm not 100% sure yet, to be honest with you.
Well, then I would suggest that we table this, and when you figure out which
When
location
I get a
would be-
feel for where I want to put this little cart?
Yeah, we will just hold your application in committee.
Okay,
And once you figure out where you want to be, you can come back and let us know,
Yeah.
and we'll go from there.
yeah, I can't be definitive, because I'm not sure as to the specific market area that I could park this thing that's going to be effective, whether it's on High Street, or whether it's up on Northampton, or whether it's, so,
Counselor Anderson Burgos?
Through the chair. So, when were you planning? When were you planning on starting?
probably,
setting up?
well, we're coming into winter.
Yes.
It took me 8 months just to get this thing in from China and get it retrofitted and do everything with the RMV, and then go through all the paperwork that had to be done with my first witness, Board of Health. No, just
So it wouldn't be till next year anyway?
well, I'm going to try to get in for the very end of this year
Okay.
to see how we can do, and then get a feel for it, because I am dealing with other municipalities and probably bringing in more carts
Yeah.
put together, dealing with Northampton and Amherst and that kind of stuff. But I started in Holyoke because I'm familiar with Holyoke,
Right.
as you well know. After I sort of quasi-retired.
We don't really retire, do we, though?
No, we don't retire. We just sort of dance away. And so to answer your question, the location, I'm not sure. And I'd have to define it and then probably come back. But you only have your meetings once a month.
Once or twice, sometimes 3 times.
Okay. So I'll ask you this question. Are there people I can contact once I've sort of defined this?
Yes, you
To
could reach,
maybe make a informal, formal situation?
so we'll keep this in the file, and when you determine an address, you can reach out to Ryan Allen, who's our
Ryan,
administrative
yes, I
assistant,
spoke to Ryan, nice young man.
and let him know that you're ready to go on the next agenda.
Okay, which might be a month down the road.
That would be fine. You could communicate to him, or you could communicate to any of us on the committee, or all of us.
Okay, and how would I get all of your informations to be able to communicate to?
City website.
The city website, or through Ryan Allen, if you communicate with Ryan and ask him to copy it to the committee,
Okay,
he
I could,
will.
yeah, I can ask Ryan on that one.
He's
yeah.
the easiest,
He operates out of,
right back here, City Hall.
what is it, clerk's
Here-
office, yeah? No?
No, he's right behind here, the
Oh, he is?
administrative office
Okay.
for the city
I
council.
can't remember how I got to him the first time, but,
And just for the record, can you give us your name and address?
sorry?
For the record, for tonight, can you,
My name is Charles Theocles.
and your address?
Corporate address is 123 Mulberry Street, Springfield,
Okay,
01105.
okay, thank you.
And thank you.
Just
Thank you all.
a quick question, if I
Counselor
could.
McGivern?
Yes, sir.
Charles, you said it's a hawker's license?
I'm sorry?
You said you have a hawker's license?
I do, a state hawker's license.
Okay, but do you have a food vendor license?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's different from the hawker's license.
Well, we have Board of Health and DPW okayed, but the food license, I think, comes from the Board of Health.
Right. Okay, because there's a lot of confusion, I think, when I heard hawkers. Hawkers is a whole different, we don't deal with hawkers
No.
license.
We're just dealing with the food cart.
Food cart, yeah, and we're not even dealing with the food cart, we're dealing with a food cart, as you said, on city property.
Right,
And that's, you gotta be one site
Well-
specific where you shut up shop every day.
right.
To answer your question,
I wasn't asking a question, I was telling you an answer.
Statement.
okay, so now I'm going to ask you a question.
Through the chair.
Basically, the information that I got from Jane
Yeah.
because I was getting a state hawker's license, it allowed me to go basically anywhere that I need to go, depending on what the municipality allowed, obviously from a traffic and a congestion situation, et cetera, et cetera. But because of the hawker's license, I didn't need to go through another level within the city because of the hawker's license. So they sort of abbreviated it, and they needed to know that the DPW would have the requirements that they needed, which was a liability policy and whatever else they needed to interact with the facilitation of a food cart.
Okay.
That's the way it was explained to me. It got a little bit convoluted. That's why it was, yeah.
So just to help those in the audience, what we have attached to the order is a mobile food permit issued by the Board of Health.
Yes,
And we have a special state license for hawker or peddler.
right. And then that sort of changed the complexity if I was just getting everything just for a specific location in Holyoke, to my understanding. I don't know. So there was a different set of paperwork. They didn't have me, the clerk's office didn't have me fill out another set of forms because of the hacker's license. So they said, just take the short form, whatever that was, and
So we have those two
get it signed
things
off by
in
Board
the
of Health and
record.
DPW.
I understand, but
Yeah.
the hawker's license, we haven't dealt with that yet.
No.
And if we start giving permission for hawkers to set up shop in city property, that's a whole different can of worms.
Right. So this is attached to the application, but the application is specifically for
food.
a food cart.
Yeah. So you can only sell food with the permit that we're issuing.
Correct.
On
That's
city
just for food. And is that what you intend to be selling?
That's all.
Okay.
And one very narrow type of food, which is gyro.
Okay. Okay, so
That's
when-
all we're selling,
Okay.
is gyro and a soda, that's
All
all.
right, so when you're ready,
A very simple approach to life.
well, it
Well, I'll
sounds,
have to taste it because you'll never taste a gyro like this.
all right, well, it sounds very good. And once you know where you would like to be, come on down and
Or
we'll,
possible multiple places.
Here on Tuesdays.
Yes, that's what I was afraid of.
All right.
And possible multiple places that we can define
but you
and say,
need-
you can go there, but you can't go here because of certain traffic
you'll
requirements.
just need to
I don't
be
know.
specific.
Yeah.
And then we can check it out.
I can do that.
All right,
I will
thank
get
you
all of
very
your
much.
information, and I'll try to keep it away from the DNI, and you'll be all fine.
Thanks.
Make a motion, we table this request?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll continue?
Yes.
Thank you all.
You let us know. We'll hold it till we hear from you. All right.
Madam Chair, we do have one department head here, so I don't know if you want to.
Yes, that's next.
Okay. So, a motion-
you.
Is that good?
You're all set.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down.
Unless you want to start singing.
I'll accept a motion to go out of order to item 6.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item 6 was filed by Council Bresnahan, that the Ordinance Committee review the current vacant and blighted building ordinance by calling in the Health Department, the Building Department, the Greater Holyoke Landlord Association, and any other concerned parties to address the ordinance and determine if there is a more business landlord-friendly way to ensure vacant buildings are in compliance with the current ordinance. So back in the spring, I want to say, we had a number of people down. We had a fairly long discussion on this matter, but I had noted that it was tabled and that there was perhaps some information or communication to be forthcoming, maybe from the building association or some group that was not here that night. But I have not heard from the original maker of the order, and Sean is here, so maybe you can just update us on anything you have, because my inclination, if there is nothing new to come up, then I'm leaning toward thinking it's complied with.
Well, I haven't received any communication in this regard, and
Is it a green
it
light
is,
on?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I haven't received any additional communication in regards to this order from any individual or association. So on my end, We're getting ready to send out notices for the next registration cycle that begins in October, and it'll end in November.
And how do you feel it's working out in the implementation and the whole area relative to the ordinance?
I have to say the same thing I said last time, is that if a property owner is communicative and responds to notices, there really is no reason that someone would have to pay either the full amount or, it could be reduced to either zero or a partial amount, as long as someone is willing to approach myself, or the building department, or the law department, depending on what avenue they choose to use, if they go through council. The only people who are paying the full amount on these are people who are either not in compliance with city ordinance and are not responsive to orders, or people who have just fallen out of compliance, and then when they're noticed that changes need to be made or an update is required, they choose not to do so. But there is no reason that someone who, is in communication with us needs to pay that fee. There are so many avenues that you can pursue to reduce or defer the fee. So,
All right. Well, thank you for coming down a second time.
no problem at all.
Are there, Council Murphy?
Yeah, so Sean, I mean, having many vacant buildings in my ward, or vacant and or blighted, but I'll say mostly vacant and blighted besides. So are you saying that every year, if it's a vacant building, they get a notification from you or the
They do.
building committee telling them to do what?
So every year, and this has evolved the way we've sent it out, it used to be entirely first-class mail. Now it's entirely certified, and then we also send out another backup copy first-class mail. So you're getting 2 copies of the same notice for every building on the list, and in that notice, in that envelope, you're going to receive a registration form, an appeal form, a link, it's a written link, but directions to access the ordinance if you need to review it or you didn't receive it when we sent out the latest copy in 2017. And you'll also get an invoice that specifically informs you how much is owed at this renewal cycle. And so the instructions are very clear, whom to contact is clear, what's required, the deadlines for an appeal, it's all in that packet.
So when you say how much they owe, are they owing money because it's vacant or because it's blighted, or?
The criteria is vacant or blighted. Vacant is pretty standard definition, meaning there's no lawful occupancy or there's no lawful business at the address. Blighted is a little bit more of a broad definition, but it can include a building that is not safe, has a red X, or it's missing more than a certain portion of windows or doors, or it's unsecured, even if there may be a partial occupancy there. If you have a building that's a mess and there's one person living in that building, which we've run into, it still falls under the blighted definition. And the invoice is based off of the fee schedule that was established in the ordinance. So single-family homes are $500, and then all other buildings that are, single to 3-family homes are $500, it's set. And then all other buildings that are either 4 units or more or mixed use are a graduated scale that moves up through the duration of vacancy.
And what's the maximum?
3,000.
3,000, okay. And so all those buildings with red X's, those owners get, if we're not the city owning them, those get a notification.
They do.
This month or next month?
It'll go out this month, and the deadline will be next month.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to note that Councilors Bartley, Councilor Lisi, and Councilor Bresnahan are with us. And Councilor Bresnahan, we went out of order, and we're actually on your order that you had filed relative to the vacant and blighted buildings. And we got as far as Sean giving us an update and asking him how it had been going as you came in the door. So.
Yeah, great, thank you very much. Sean, thanks for coming down. I know we kind of exchanged emails. I mean, the gist of this was that the Greater Holyoke Landlord Association had approached me and said, basically, if I get a permit out, like, for instance, the owner of the block on Elm and Dwight Street pulled the permit, was doing new porches, he was still getting hit for the fines, according to him. And having years ago helped kind of get this in the ordinance. I knew there was an appeal process. It sounds like the appeal process, they used to just come to the Board of Health, a meeting, the chair and the three person board. But in all honesty, I emailed the Greater Holyoke Landlord Association, as well as Sean Beatty from Hammers and Nails, Rob McLaren, Ilya Schneider, Greg Virgilio, and I told them that this order was filed for your input on this, and you were graceful enough to allow them to have any sort of input they wanted that might help them through this process. So if they wanted to buy, what we don't want to do is we don't want to prevent people from buying buildings because they have to pay $3,000 because it takes years to renovate some of these old buildings. But I let them all know the time, the place, and I did this on behalf of them. And
Okay.
I don't see any landlords here that I am aware of.
Okay.
So apparently they think the ordinance is great, so good job.
Well, they did come down in February.
Right, they did come, and I believe, if I'm wrong, but didn't we lay this at their feet and say, come
Yes.
propose your thoughts on this ordinance, and we'll be happy to vet them out?
Right, and I believe that's why we left it tabled instead of closing it out, just to leave that opportunity, so.
I don't own any vacant buildings, so I left it at their feet, and, obviously I did let them know about this meeting, and there would be a good opportunity for them to put their thoughts forward, and
All right, then.
so I'm happy to come and say it's complied with.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll entertain a motion. Second? Do we have a- All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. Back nights.
Thanks for coming down. Okay. I guess we can go back to regular
You
order.
want to take, oh, no, well, Crystal's here anyhow, so I guess. I'm just here. Just the usual, yeah. You were here last night too, but
We can do,
it wasn't too torturous, I hope. There you go. You don't hear that too often. Counselor Murphy. Hear that? Not when you chair a meeting anyhow. Could we just suspend and take 2 or 3 together as a package? It
Sure.
looks like they're the same thing.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So item 2, filed by Counselor Murphy, ordered that a handicap sign be placed in front of 527 South Summer Street for Carmen Robles. And item 3, filed by Counselor Lebron-Martinez, that ordered that the City of Holyoke place a handicap parking sign at 11 Center Street for Carmen Roy. So Disabilities Commission did get back to us and recommend for both of them. And then, as we have had lately, there are some other interesting factors with some of these. So, the first one on South Summer is straightforward. Our engineer, Bob Parent, has sent us the language that we need, and Disabilities Commission has recommended approval. So why don't we do that one first?
Motion to
Make a
approve.
motion, yep.
Put it into legal form, whatever it is.
And we already have that, right?
Okay.
So we're good for that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the next one on South Summer,
No.
Center.
Center, is, in the current ordinance table are contained 3 handicap parking entries for this section of Center Street. 140 feet south of Canal, 160 feet south of Canal, 232 feet south of Canal. Only one of these spaces is currently posted, which is the 140 foot south of Canal. So in 2015, based on the street view photography, there were 4 marked handicap spaces on this section of Center Street. In 2011, there were 3 marked spaces. The current entry for 232 feet south of Canal Street would work for the current order. Number 11 Center Street is on the opposite side of the one-way street, and the parking is angled, so it's hard to say which one of the angled spaces is exactly in front of number 11. But nonetheless, because there are already spaces in ordinance, his recommendation is that we do not adopt a new order before us, but that DPW reinstall the sign that is already in the ordinance table for the 232 foot south of Canal Street. Because the public is not perceiving that it is that.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that the order's been complied with and that we,
I think we need to adopt
If I may, I'm just gonna say that, the order's been complied with, that we recommend that we adopt whatever is written by Mr. Parent, and then we do order the DPW to put up the signs as appropriate.
Is there a second?
Second.
So, under discussion, I just want to note that he also stated that the council may want to delete the space identified as 160 feet south of Canal Street, since that space is no longer marked and apparently no longer needed.
So moved.
But, well, I think, and Crystal can jump in, I think we might have to file another order to actually delete it out of the ordinance.
Oh, there you go, all right.
Yeah, so just to keep it. I think what happened before is we said we didn't need it and the signs got taken down, but we never actually did take it out of ordinance.
So you'll file the order, Madam Chair?
Sure.
All right.
All right, so we have a motion seconded
Seconded.
just to add the sign without changing the ordinance, per recommendation of our engineer. Counselor Murphy?
Yeah, just, so he indicated that that would be pretty much right opposite 11 Center?
Right, he said the parking spaces are at an angle.
Right.
But I'm gonna say visually, when they go down there to put the sign up, they can put it at the one that's closest to,
11.
and that's what this measurement would be.
Okay,
He's just saying, for purposes of our meeting, he couldn't tell us, is it the first or second one
okay,
facing the building?
okay. But this, in his opinion, is the closest one
Yeah,
to the property.
right, the 232
Okay, thank you.
feet south. Anything else? So, I mean, one thing to your request relative to these is, if, in the case of this one, before the order was filed, if, say, we asked legal or the engineer to check in the ordinance, I don't know how often this happens, that the ordinance is still there with a space, and we just don't know it, but it seems like it's happened a couple of times recently.
So with the ordinance, though, there was no signage, correct?
Right, so I think what may have happened, you know how these things ebb and flow, right? So I think somebody may have moved and somebody said, we don't need the handicap space anymore. And so the sign got taken down, but the ordinance didn't get changed. In this case, it's making it easy, we just put the sign back up,
Because I'm almost positive,
but,
about 4 months ago, we took down 14 Center Street as a handicap spot because the person no longer lived there. I'm thinking it's 14, which would be not too far.
well, right. But apparently, it's still in the ordinance
right,
too, because there's another one, which he's recommending to eliminate. All right? So on the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Motion to take up number 5, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 5 was filed by Counselor Murphy, that the Ordinance Committee meet with the Building Commissioner and the City Solicitor to discuss the merits of establishing a fine for property owners who have had their property sealed off blocking a street past a certain period. There are at least a couple of properties which are depriving others of easy access to their homes and businesses with no immediate solution being proposed. Now, I did get a communication from Mr. Cody. Did
No, I did not.
you didn't? Hang on. So it came in around 2 o'clock today. And item 5. Let's see who it went to. It went to Ryan, Crystal, Sean, me, and Mike McManus. Relative to item 5, he said, I'm not sure what this is referring to. If it is related to the public streets or sidewalks, then I do not have authority. I believe that this is about fencing and the like that is on the sidewalk street to protect the public. In this case, it is permitted through the DPW city engineer. I believe that they, the city engineer, can fine or regulate this more so than me. At the same time, we can pursue the owner indirectly for the issues that are requiring the fence. I think maybe he means directly, but that's what arrived this afternoon. So maybe, as the maker of the order, maybe you could,
Yeah, I mean, I have one property on Main and Hamilton Street, which
Main and Hamilton?
which the roof blew off in February. And Main Street has been blocked off until about a month ago. You could not go from Main Street to down Hamilton Street to Vega Park, and you couldn't come from Hamilton Street up to Main Street. It was all blocked off. And when I first brought it up, I was told that, it's in the process of being sold. And I said, well, are they gonna be, whoever's doing this, are they gonna repair the roof so that people can, again, use the street and be able to park? And obviously, businesses on Main Street have asked me, can we get this open? So that was one. The other one is the church property up here on Appleton Street, which is, I think, Appleton and Walnut Street. Those homeowners have been blocked from using their street probably now for about 4 years. And it's my understanding that we just put a fence up and that's all we can do. And
We, the city?
yeah.
I don't think it's been 4 years, it's been like 4 months maybe.
Up on Appleton Street? No. They're up on Appleton and Walnut? Oh, that's been there a long time. They lost roofing as well. And
So which church is this?
it's an inactive church right now.
Oh,
They're
so it's
trying-
closed?
They're trying to sell it.
Oh,
to my knowledge.
okay.
And it was my understanding that the gentleman on Main and Hamilton Street was trying to sell it. But my point is, to me, there's no accountability for the owner of that property to resolve their problem in a timely manner. And I don't know exactly what a timely manner would be, but it shouldn't be 6-7 months, or now they are finally fixing the roof.
It's too bad Sean isn't still here. This sounds like a vacant blighted building issue, but
very bad.
can we suspend rules and let legal?
Yeah.
Necessary rules allow.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So there's a couple of moving parts here. So the issue is usually if there's a fence going up, there's an owner that either isn't paying attention or there's a serious problem with the property. So the building commissioner is correct in that DPW allows the fences to go up. They permit them for X amount of days. So the one on Main Street, it was up, it was still up. That was going through a sale at the same time that it was like the decorative side of the roof had fallen. So the fence has to be up for safety issues. They had taken out a permit for X amount of days. As it came due, I scoped out who the attorney was that was dealing with the purchase and sale. As soon as that sale went through, I contacted him and said, listen, you need to get this fixed. If you've noticed, the scaffolding is up. They're working away at it. We did find them. As the fence was still there and we weren't getting any progress, we sent out a notice of violation, and the fact that their permit was lapsing for the fence to be up, we did send them a fine. So we can do that. In the instance of the church, that there's a lot of brickwork that is falling off of that church. So again, the fence needs to be up for safety reasons. However, there's sort of this lapse in where the church structure is going as far as like their internal business structure, not necessarily the church itself. They're looking to sell. The people who are currently there can't afford to pay for the problem. So the fence is there for safety, but there's really no recourse there because the fence has to be there. We can fine them all day. They don't have money to fix the problem. They're not going to have money to pay the fine. It's a kind of this chasing your own tail. We are reaching out. We are in contact with them to do a walkthrough of our own. Economic Development's going to go walk through there, see what kind of funding we can find, try and see if we can move along the sale to see what's going on. So as much as I know it's really a burden to people to have these fences up, you kind of run into these unique situations where, there's a problem, you need the street to be safe, but at the same time, the problem can't get fixed because there's no money to do it. The city doesn't want to take it on to do it because we're talking, I think the engineer for the church issue is somewhere around $80,000 to $100,000 to fix that. So we're looking at options. Can you shore it up? Can you make it safe up closer to the steeple so that the fence doesn't have to be down? So that's something that the city is going to try and help by going in and doing our own walk around and walk through and see if, is there funding that we can get them? Is there another church that we can contact that maybe wants to buy this and take it on? There's a lot of vacant lots next door that are all owned by various church organizations. Can somebody sell those and help, deal with this? So as much as, fines always seem like a good idea, sometimes you're chasing an empty wallet. And so The fence is there for everybody's safety. As much as I know it's a burden, we're working on it, but some of these aren't a quick solution.
But if I can, just,
A follow-up?
so, we did find the people on Main and Hamilton and the church, or we haven't found one of them?
We have not found the church. I mean, like I said, it's kind of a weird situation. And I don't know, I don't believe there's a permit for the fence so much as the fence is up for a safety issue. I think the permit on the Main Street fence ran out, which is how they ended up with a fine. So there was a difference there. I mean, certainly, if the church is going to take it on, there will be fines issued for the fence that's there. But we'd be fining ourselves at this point because that money's not going to go anywhere. But we've had like fencing issues, dumpster issues, things like that, where they're not complying with time limits. We send, warning notices out, and if they're still not complying, that's when the fines go out.
Okay.
Counselor Bartley?
Yeah,
Need a mic.
I have a mic right here. Madam Chair, it's okay, thank you. We share on this side of the table. So I'm just going to make a couple comments. I'm going to have a question for the solicitor in a second. I wish this order wasn't so vague, Councilor Murphy, because otherwise I probably would have signed on to it, because this is a terrific order, and it really deserves full hearing with people in front of us, specifically noting Walnut Street and Main Street. So this is a great order, and I'd happily sign on to it now if I was allowed to, because it just makes a lot of sense.
Allowed to.
To get this out there. It just wasn't clear to me what this was about. To the solicitor, a fine issued, so was a fine paid? What's the status of the fine?
I don't know that right now.
Can you communicate that to us, please?
I can.
And I want to see a copy of it too, please. You can email it to me or whomever else is interested, but I'm very interested in knowing exactly who this is and what they were doing. Relative to Walnut Street, there's certainly an article, just a quick research, so there's an article going back to winter of 2018. So it wasn't 4 months, but it certainly wasn't 4 years, so right in the middle, a couple years, this has been going on. This is embarrassing. And for that particular street, where I forgot the name of the apartments, but what are those apartments named after Carlos Vega?
I
On
think
Walnut
they
Street,
are, yeah.
on the left side? Yes, I'm almost sure that they are. So that's ironic, isn't it? So you got Carlos Vega Park cut off, and then the Vega Apartments cut off for going on 2 years. I mean, that's irony upon irony right there. So I mean, there's finger pointing time is over with, but there are CDBG funds that possibly could be eligible for. There's CPA funds possibly could be eligible for that. But somebody's got to take some leadership on this and make something happen, put a proposal before us. We just had a $32,000 proposal in DGR last night for the Portuguese American Hall in One Holyoke. So One Holyoke's taking the bull by the horns. So what neighborhood group, what elected official is responsible for that particular neighborhood? Let's make a move, whether it's an at-large counselor or a ward counselor. Somebody's got to take this by the horns. Not the Ward 2 counselor, not the Ward 3 counselor, but somebody's got to be moving this forward and making a proposal, either specific recommendation or asking the mayor to get something moving on this. How can we let a street say blocked off for safety purposes for 2 years, and we have a church that's in limbo and it just sits there? And but for Councilor Murphy's order, we don't even know what's going on. I'm just so grateful he put this forward. So I hope this is just a message for other councilors and for the mayor to try to take some kind of affirmative steps. I mean, this is a public way that's been blocked off going on nearly 2 years with a chain link fence, and we just let it sit there. I'm embarrassed by it. I don't know if anybody else is, but if this was in any other part of town, I'm wondering if this would have got fixed a little bit quicker. I don't need to name any streets, but I bet we could all think of a couple streets that if they were blocked off with a fence, I bet that fence would be down real fast. But maybe Walnut Street, Walnut and Appleton, and that's exactly where it is, maybe Walnut and Appleton is exactly a high priority for certain elected officials. Well, it is. It should be. It has every right to have this free for a normal thoroughfare. And what if there's a fire there, by the way? Do we have a game plan? I guess they could go the other end on Suffolk is open, but I assume there's some sort of a game plan, but I bet we don't know what it is. So I find this unconscionable, frankly. Again, I thank Council Murphy for filing it, and I'm glad to add my name to it because something's got to move forward. And you know what? I bet nothing will move forward, so I'll just take it upon myself. I'll file the order by noon on Thursday to figure out something. We'll get an appropriation from the mayor, either, or we'll make a recommendation to Ms. McManus to put in a CDBG request, or we'll make a recommendation to get a CPA funding, because there's some, or or even as frugal as some of us are with stabilization, for heaven's sakes, this is a public way. So let's get an appropriation request from stabilization to shore this up. I mean, I think everybody in this room would get behind that. You don't let it sit there for going on 2 years. And we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilor Murphy. Oh,
I'll defer to you, Mike.
Go ahead.
I'll let the young guys talk. So, and again, my purpose is to try to get things where we're going to get things cleaned up and safer and not have inconvenience. So, one of my questions was related to if we had fined and the fencing. I know because I met with Mr. McManus about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the fencing had been moved, so now half of the street has been opened because they have now done some work on the roof. And I'm assuming that's a new owner, but I don't know that.
You're talking about the Main Street property?
Yeah.
So yeah, when the purchase happened, they were able to move the fences, work started. But that was, it was a process. We had to kind of harass them a little bit to get that work started.
Yeah, and see, that's my point, if he's selling it, then he would have an incentive to get the work done if he was being fined, and hopefully it would not be, this is 6.5 months after the wind blew the roof off. And again, it does create a discomfort. It does create a feeling like, with all due respect, and I think this kind of goes to Councilor Bartley's statement that, they're not handling this because we're not important. And I'm not saying that's the case of the people that are trying to think about this, but when you're in the neighborhood and you just can't keep going parking, that does have a negative impact, and it definitely has a negative impact on the people in South Holyoke trying to get to Main Street. But again, whatever we can do to, and I'm willing to bet that I'm probably going to have other buildings in South Holyoke or Churchill at some point where they have damage, and are we going to be blocking those off as well? So my hope is that whatever we do, whatever we can come up with, moves the process so that we're not talking 6 or 7 months where a street's blocked off for safety, but that we find some way of dealing with it, whether it be coming up with city funds and then having those funds assessed when the sale is made. I don't know if that's the right way, but I know leaving them there for 6 months or for a couple of years, it creates a convenience for people that are paying their taxes, trying to live and trying to do the right thing. So,
all set. Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Councilor Bacon. Just a quick question and a couple of thoughts, if I could, to the solicitor. Crystal, a church doesn't pay taxes. I believe this church doesn't pay any taxes. How does a city acquire church property? If there's no tax title or no issues with taxes being not paid.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah. I'm curious because I don't know the answer.
Well, that's sort of why we chased our tails here, because, in a residential property, we'd go after them for code enforcement, you do receiverships, et cetera, but a church poses a very interesting problem of, yes, it's residential, so could we bring it in housing court? Absolutely, but then what do you do?
The last thing we want to do is own more property, but I think we have to get an answer to that question. And then I want to give us something to think about, some food for thought about what David was talking about. We have laws in place. Now, a fine is great, but why aren't we billing the property owners for the fence, for the cost of putting the fence up? We put the fence up to save, for safety purposes, to save people from getting injured. It was city property. But it's private property that's causing the problem. And they are responsible, and they have to have insurance. I would think their insurance company would want to be doing something about this, because if they have insurance, the insurance should be shoring up that building. If they don't, and if it's not being done, the building department has the right to shore that building up, send the bill to the property owner, attach it and lien it, so if they do sell it, we get the money back for whatever work the city does. Those laws are all in place.
Correct.
It's department heads that are not doing their job, and that's what I don't understand.
Well, we're talking about a very large bill here. This isn't like a
It's got nothing to do with the
fine.
amount of the bill, it's got nothing to do with, how do we distinguish one property owner from another? How do you find one property owner but not the other? That is inconsistent and unfair. I'm not gonna ask who owns the property, but I think we have to do something consistently across the board. But I think there's better ways to do it than a fine. I think we just have to do the work and bill them.
Thanks. I know that the church situation poses some complications, but I just wanted to make sure I understood the process. So I think Councilor McKibben just kind of spelled it out. So usually it's a fine and then a lien, and then we take the property. Is that the normal process if the property owner was not a nonprofit or a church in this instance?
We generally try and not take properties. The city certainly doesn't want to own more properties, because then what do we do with a church? I don't know what we're going to develop out of a church. Do you put condos in it? I've seen that done, but it's something that we would have to think of, and it's always a monetary issue. I mean, fixing the steeple, the engineers came out with, a six-figure quote. That's a lot of money, and certainly we want the owners to handle this bill. They're choosing to try and sell it. Whoever they're selling it to has to prove to us that they can take on whatever the problem is, and they have to have proof of financing to do that. We do have a walkthrough scheduled to kind of see, what funding we can get for them to assist them. The church has also undergone a leadership switchover. So where we kept thinking we had contacts, it kept being a moving target. Certainly there will be money there to recoup. It's just when that paperwork happens.
So, and if we could just move away from the church as like a unique experience, the normal protocol is the fine, the lien, and then if we don't want to take the property, what else are we doing with it in order to, remedy the situation?
So the fines get issued. So a notice of violations usually goes out before any fine gets issued. If we happen to have any further contact, sometimes even an email goes out before that paperwork goes out, to try and, nip the problem in the butt, especially, if there's a storm, we see something happen, we reach out to the homeowner and we kind of give them some time to repair things. Fines are usually our last resort. That's really when we're not getting any communication. And the idea is that you want money to go towards the fix. You don't want it to go towards fines and violations, et cetera. And, we've been known in the past that if you have outstanding fines sitting on your property, but we can get you to actually do the work, maybe those fines disappear because you finally did what we wanted you to do. It's an incentive, assuming that there's no out-of-pocket cost to us. So if I have to record a lien, those recording costs are coming back to us. But the notice violations would go out, the lien or the fine would get issued. If they don't pay the fine in a certain amount of time, then it gets liened to the property. Those liens, when taxes go out once a year, somewhere around January, those liens all go on your taxes. So when you pay your taxes, that's when those liens will come back to us. Or if you transfer the property, we get those liens paid because you have to clear title before you can transfer. In the instance that the liens go on the tax roll, you don't pay your taxes, so then it turns into, a tax title situation. At some point, the city would hopefully see that money back, but for the most part.
We don't bill taxes to the church.
Correct, but if they have a lien on the property, I do believe that counts towards, that's not part of like a tax obligation. It would be a lien on the property that we could collect. As far as a tax taking, because there's a lien on it, I'm not quite positive how that would work with a nonprofit entity.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Bartley?
Thank you.
Crystal, if I may, even though it is a church, they wouldn't be exempt from gas and electric fees or waterwork fees. So is there a possibility that a G&E lien or a waterworks lien could lean lead ultimately to a city acquiring that property through that process. I don't know that answer. I'm just throwing out a hypothetical.
I don't know that answer either, and I don't know if we can foreclose on those, or if I mean, I know we can do a tax taking process, so I'm not positive what the process would look like if we have just outstanding liens versus outstanding taxes.
Yeah, and we all agree that we're on the business of owning property, but we all know what happened when the former treasurer took over the Essex House. We're still scratching our heads over that one, but he did it, and that's Exhibit A as to why you don't acquire property. Right there, that's Exhibit A for, I think for all time. That's an all-time Exhibit A. As we just discussed last night in DGR, that's ongoing now for, when did we say? That was December of 14?
14.
December 14, so we established that date last night. I think it might have been the December 11th of 14. So the last time in that neighborhood, we had a controversy about a building coming down, and that being the YMCA parking lot. That was a Far Alpaca mansion. So I'm not hearing any advocates from that area relative to the current building, but maybe there is a historical interest in that building. It's a lovely building, as we march by it every year for the St. Patrick's Day Parade, and as a YMCA member for almost 30 years, as I park near there, certainly you've seen the beauty of the building. It's a lovely building, but it's defunct. So there's got to be not a known path, but there's got to be a path to acquiring church property. But that's not even what we want to do. We just want to get the fence out of the way. So the way to do that is the building commissioner's got to advise us on what the cost is to shore up that building so the fence can be removed. We can't just let it sit there dormant. I mean, we need a direct communication from the building commissioner. So I'm going to make that motion in a second. I'm also going to make a motion after everybody's had a chance to speak. It's a follow-up on what Councilor McGivern just said, because we do need to get a communication from the building commissioner exactly as to who's paying for the fence, what, and then why and why not. In other words, if it's on the Main Street fence, if it's the City of Holyoke paying for it, why? And why isn't the private entity paying for it? So I'll make that motion once we're done through all the discussion here. But we need a communication from the building commissioner sent to us for the next city council for the next Tuesday city council meeting. But that's something I just want you to consider going forward. Because I mean, clearly that should have been the responsibility of the vendor on Main Street. I think on Walnut Street, it sounds like we're pretty well stuck. I mean, because there's nobody to latch onto, and the building commissioner made a decision, which I have no question, not questioning that, but it's been sitting there for 2 years. So it's time to get a little, get a game plan together. So I'll make that motion, not yet, Madam Chair, but when you tell me discussion's over, I'll make
One last time.
Okay, thanks. So Crystal, I was just interested to know, in these two examples, would you say there are exceptions within the whole scope of things that we're dealing with, or that things like this happen fairly often? I mean, I'm just trying to think of it from, is there anything we could do to fix it if it needs it or not?
Each property poses a unique problem. It's how much does it cost to remedy the situation that's causing the fence? Is an owner somebody that we can actually get in touch with, or is it a missing owner? Is it an estate? Is it a bank that doesn't want to deal with it? Or is it an owner that has literally walked away from the property and we have no contact with them? Or maybe they're just, bankrupt. They don't have the money. In the instance of a church, you only have so much money as your parishioners get you, other than fundraising, things of that nature. So that poses an interesting situation. We had bricks falling a lot last year. Various buildings had bricks falling off the facade. If we could reach the owner, we made them put up a fence and make it safe, fix the bricks. We filed actions in court. Main Street was headed that way. We had an active purchase and sale. So at some point it's like, okay, do we file suit and put our time and effort into that when you're sitting there looking at a closing date in 2 weeks?
Right.
And I have an actual owner that I can go after, whereas the prior owner is non-existent, doesn't have, a leg to stand on. You kind of weigh the cost and benefits. So especially with Main Street, we literally had a tangible owner coming in that I knew who his legal counsel was. I knew I could reach out and get an answer and a response versus wasting the time and energy to throw it in court, mess up their purchase and sale. It was kind of a cost-benefit analysis there, and it worked out well. Once we got the new owner in there, the fencing got moved in, you could use the street, now he's shoring it up and he's fixing the problem. So each property we attack a little differently. We do code enforcement meetings once a week. I mean, we're constantly doing a flood of properties. There's one of me doing housing court. We thankfully have a new associate who is going to be starting to do this. The building department, the Board of Health, they have plenty of inspections happening weekly, and that's mostly because I keep making them do more and more. So, there's always that scenario of how much money is it going to take? Is this something the city can help them with? We reach out to CDBG. We find out if there's funding there. Can you get historic tax credits? Can you get any federal tax credits? Is anyone providing any funding anywhere to help you? And
So it seems like.
funding sounds good. There's
Yeah.
funding out there. There's an application process. That takes time. Does it meet the qualifications of the funding? Some of these things just, you end up chasing your tail and hope that you get some glimmer of hope somewhere that somebody's willing to put up the funds. But at the end of the day, I mean, $100,000 is a huge price tag, especially for a nonprofit.
Right. So it sounds like the church situation is really sort of an exceptional situation.
It is, and it's been talked about quite a bit through our problem property group, through code enforcement. What are we going to do? So we finally have a point of contact. We're narrowing down to an hour that we are going to go there and actually walk through it ourselves and kind of determine what our next steps are. Do we help develop it? Do we put our funds out there? But this is a private owner. Does the city want to keep
Exactly.
putting funds out to help private owners?
And there's
They
a
took
lot
on the
of them.
responsibility. We try and help them as much as we can, but we got to figure out what to do next. And you have to figure out the end game to figure out all your steps to get there.
Right. Thank you. Counselor Anderson Burgos?
Yeah, did you say that it was transferred over, like, from one owner to the next?
So Main Street that was a purchase and sale that
Okay, so
happened.
we're not talking about Walnut.
We are not talking about the church yet. There is a proposal that it may be selling soon, but I at least have a current person from the church to speak with to allow us to at least get in there and do our own analysis of it, because we haven't been in there for a while.
All right, yeah, because I think it would be a great idea to make sure whoever's going to buy it can actually afford
Correct.
the upkeep, the
Right.
fixing and all that, because we don't need to prolong this any further. Yeah, thanks.
Counselor McGivern?
Just a note, and I'm sure Crystal's referring to funds, but the city cannot spend general budget dollars on private property. We cannot do that. That's why I said if we do any work, it has to be billed out. And that's the city doing work and then building out the work that it's done. The cost of fence should be billed out, regardless of what happens. But we can't just go work on private property with general fund dollars. There are other CDBG monies and monies that could be used, I think. But, case by case, we have to be careful about that because there's a lot of people that could use help.
Thank you. Not seeing any more.
Well, I just want to make a
You
motion
wanna make-
that, just from this committee to send to the building commissioner, that the building commissioner provide us, just and hopefully in a couple paragraphs, an update on Main Street, relative to the cost of the fence, who paid for it, an explanation of why if the city paid for it, why, and why not the vendor. And then the second part of that, just to get an update from the building commissioner to a game plan. I think we heard part of it right now, but now I want it in writing from the building commissioner relative to the game plan going forward for to remove the fencing at Appleton and Walnut.
Counselor, if I could, the DPW does a lot of these fencing issues, so it may help to request communication from DPW.
So I'll amend that to say a communication from the building commissioner and/or the Department of Public Works.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, and just specifically, if I could just so we can have for the next meeting,
For the next meeting?
October 15th meeting, please.
On the amendment, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
For October 15th, city council meeting.
Communication, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. On to item 6.
Well, we gotta make a motion for what do you want to do with this, Council Murphy? What does he want?
Yeah, make a motion, it's been complied with.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right, I'm just going through what the commissioner communicated to the committee. So,
Motion to take number 7 off the table?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
So item 7 was filed by Counselor McGivern. Order that the city council review and update if necessary, section 102-34, the collection of fees, fee schedule of chapter 102, weights and measures of the Code of Ordinances, last updated in 1997.
72.
72?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's what we were told at the last meeting.
okay. And then we had tabled that. And I'm not sure why. Counselor Bartley?
Well, I mean, I know I made the motion to table it, and we were able to table it, but it was because we had two department heads here with conflicting numbers as to what would be generated, and neither of the numbers covered the city costs. So, I mean, I said, gentlemen, can you have a meeting and get together and figure it out so we can have, at least, we're not here to make money, but can we at least have a break even, and can we at least have a consistent number? Okay, that was the answer. So I thought they would both be here or send a communication, maybe they have, with a game plan. That was the reason we tabled it, Madam Chair.
Okay, so in terms of item 7 from our building commissioner, he states that this issue is something outside the DPW and my office in terms of work. I put together the proposed numbers in my free time to try and resolve this deficiency, to try and help out. Given my demanding schedule of required tasks, I've not been able to find time for this project. As always, if there are any questions, please send them along. And I would note, he also addressed item 6, thinking that the order had been filed, discussed, and closed out earlier in the year by the full council. Wasn't sure how it was back on the agenda and thought it was a typo, but our administrative assistant had noted properly that it had been tabled.
Madam Chair, can you read that comment again, please, from the building commissioner relative to item 7?
So
Exactly what he said?
his statement relative to item 7 is that this issue is something outside of the DPW and my office in terms of work. I put together the proposed numbers in my free time to try and resolve this deficiency, to try and help out. Given my demanding schedule of required tasks, I've not been able to find time for this project. I don't personally know what department it particularly belongs in, but I mean, if we can determine that, we can make sure that we're asking the right department. And since it's Counselor McGivern's order, Counselor McGivern.
Thank you. I filed it when I learned that there are deficiencies, and I learned this through a couple department heads, and it goes back to a real short story is the mayor chose not to fill the position of sewer weights and measures, which was always a part-time position with a number of interesting city people who held that and performed the work. I think some of them did it just because they enjoyed doing it, working with weights and scales and measurements. And if you ever,
Was it in DPW or in?
no, it literally was downstairs, where the school department has taken over the little canteen thing, whatever they're running
Yeah.
downstairs.
But which department did it?
It was their own department. They had their own budget.
Its own thing?
Yeah, their
Okay.
own budget. It was a part-time person, and, they literally, the part-time salary and maybe some expenses was in the budget, and that was it. But it generated monies, but these monies covered the existing rates that, up until recently covered that expense. I believe the state is now performing the duty, which is what we were told. I heard that through the mayor's office, but we heard that through Damien,
Right.
At the last meeting.
Right.
And we are being billed by the state, in which our rates are not anywhere near what the state is charging us. I had Ryan on top of what Damien did, and I believe everybody still got their package, but I got a package here. we ran some of the rates. Damien gave us a chart, which I can't read, but it's like the entire Commonwealth. And even Damien said he couldn't read it, you know.
Provided magnifying glasses.
Yeah, I remember that, you know, but I have Chicopee, Westfield, and Northampton here. And the proposed rates that were given on this sheet, you know, I ran through each of the three communities that are our neighbors, and it's pretty comparable to what they charge. There's a couple of maybe eyeball ones that we could look at. But these proposed rates would bring in more money to offset the costs that the state is actually is charging us. I'm not going to speak for the mayor. I'm a city councilor. I don't want to be mayor. If the mayor wants to fill the sewer, weights and measures, you know, I think there's an argument there. But at the same time, you know, with the states performing the duties, we got to at least break even. This is a very important task that the city needs to perform. Whether you go to Stop and Shop, whether you go to a gas station, there's a number of things that we just take for granted, that the pump at the gas station is calibrated, that the scale at the deli is calibrated. You know, if these things are not calibrated, the cash registers, you know, are not working properly, you have problems when you, as a consumer, go into any of these places and try to purchase the products that you're looking for. So I think the state is performing the job, and I'm sure the state's qualified to perform the job. We need to get some money in to make sure we're not losing money on what we're paying the state to do the job. So I would suggest that we, for the moment, go with the proposed rates on this chart, and then go forward, and if we have to tweak them, we can tweak them as we go.
So Counselor McGivern, not having that chart immediately in front of me, would you mind? Thank you. And can we just?
And I'm not sure if everybody got what Ryan had did, but this is Northampton, Westfield, and Chicopee. And I know everybody got Damien's, but I didn't bring my magnifying glass.
Are you on? And we did have those available to us at the last meeting.
Yeah.
So I guess really, what is the will of the committee? It's sort of a thing that got dropped by the wayside, and this won't cover everything, but it would move it. So, Councilor Lisi?
Councilor Lisi first.
Thanks. I just, I think one of the questions that Councilor Bartley had asked was whether if we raised the rates to what was proposed, if we would actually break even with the state. And I think that that's where some of the questioning was. I know that Mr. McManus had a spreadsheet in his office, but he was like, it's between, we still fall short between $700 to $1,200, if I recall correctly. No, don't quote me on that, but there was still a gap. Even raising these rates, we're still not able to break even with what the state is charging us. I definitely think that the rates are appropriate. They're market-based. They're definitely not the highest rates around, and they're very much in sync with a lot of the surrounding communities. So I would be in favor of moving this forward.
Thank you. Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, I think I heard Councilor Lisi say that, I mean, since the building commissioner can't do this, or won't do this, I wish he had told us that when we met last time, that he wasn't going to follow up with it, because we could have come up with a better plan, as opposed to an email today. So, I mean, I think that could have been communicated a little sooner if the building commissioner is way too busy. First of all, he didn't say he was on his own time before, so I didn't know, and neither did Mr. McManus. Neither one indicated that. So I take it the building commissioner, speaking for Mr. McManus as well, that they're both way too busy, which I'm sure they are, but they could have communicated that they're overtaxed prior to today, which they didn't do. So that would have been one thing. Second of all, Councilor Lisi's right. I didn't want to pass this before because it wasn't a matter of $100. It's off by thousands of dollars. Thousands of dollars is what it's off by. Third of all, I thought I heard Councilor Lisi say, and I was going to second it, but I'll make the motion, she doesn't want to make it, is that somebody, a department head, apparently not DPW department head because he's too busy, and not building commissioner because he's too busy, perhaps the city treasurer, or maybe the tax collector, or maybe administrative assistant, could figure out a way to come up with a game plan to at least get us close to a break even. I have no interest. I'm not going to vote for this tonight, I'll tell you that, because it's just on spec. It's total guesswork, and I'd rather, and I know this is a small fraction of the budget, Madam Chair, I get it. This is not a big thing, but the point is, if it's such a small part, it shouldn't be overly taxing to somebody to try to put together some kind of a legible spreadsheet showing that this is what we could anticipate raising through increased cost. And by the way, I know it's not Stop and Shop that's gonna, because they'll just check the box and move on. But whether it's Strum's or whether it's some other local vendor that we all know very well and we frequent their stores on a regular basis, I hope they know who passes, whether it's small, it still triples their rate that they're being paid now in some instances. So I'd rather have a rational basis to do that. Right now, we don't. We have total guesswork because it's been sort of laid dormant since the last meeting. So I'd rather have some department head take the bull by the horns, take a crack at it, and come back to us with a rational explanation, and then we'll vote on it.
Counselor Murphy.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I think we have to raise it at some point, but I certainly would like to know, first of all, who gets the money? Where does the money come in and who records it? And once we got that, and we know we take in 3,000 from this and we take in 5,000 from that, and we're $8,000 short or $2,000 short, we have a better idea what we want to increase it by. But I know, I think Mr. McManus indicated that the contract with the state went through his department, but I'm not positive that was true. But I thought that's what he said. But does he then end up getting the reports, and does the treasurer get the money, and who's comparing notes? I mean, I'm assuming we're trusting the state, and I would hope that that's not a problem. But I would like to know, what we're taking in specifically in terms of each of those fees.
So it seems if the billing is going to DPW, that we would have to ask them to give us a summary.
Yeah, but
in terms of what you're
right. Yeah, either that or the money comes. Does the state collect the money and then give it to us?
the state bills us for doing the service.
No, I understand that, but the people that are paying for
The DPW bills it. Mike told us that at the last meeting. He bills them, and the money comes in and goes into the general coffer.
Okay.
There's not the controls that I think should be on that, but that's a separate issue from the fees.
So I would like to know what we're getting per each of the fees and how many of those fees are, so that we have an idea. If we were to raise certain fees, are we going to end up making the right amount of money?
Well, and also, how's it gonna affect the
The
people that you're
businesses.
doubling the fees
Yeah.
on?
Yes.
Counselor Lisi?
Thank you. I think we're dealing with a number of issues here. So as far as I understand, the city is basically given a list of inspections that the state does and then assessed the state's rate. And then we have to pay the state what we owe the state. And then that generates the set of bills that then the city sends out with our rates, because that's the ordinance that we have to charge people. And then in terms of, the sense of, the numbers being haphazard, I don't think that they're haphazard, because a lot of work went into looking at similar sized cities, surrounding cities, and if you have the micro piece of paper, it tells you what the state average is, and the numbers that are being proposed are not necessarily the state average. They're below the state average based on, the work that was done to figure out what would be an appropriate raise to these rates. And I think what we heard here is even with the raise to the rates, we would still fall short roughly $1,000 in terms of what the state is charging us and what we'd be bringing in. So, I think that gap speaks to the need to fill the position. And I believe that Mr. McManus and the building commissioner spoke about perhaps creating some sort of inter-community agreement and finding somebody that does, part-time work for, I don't know, I'm just making things up here, but Southampton or Westfield, and, bringing them in part-time to, fill the gap that we have. But as you all are noting very well, it's the mayor's decision at the end. And so I don't think anyone's going to put the, extra time and effort into figuring out an agreement unless they have the blessing of the mayor and then, some rates from the city council that would generate enough to cover the salary of somebody working, part-time. And right now, we don't even have, we don't even have enough money generated from our rates the way they are to pay somebody at a part-time wage.
I'm going to guess that job never paid for itself in the city. It's just.
It was
Not in the end, maybe in the beginning.
Yeah.
yeah.
It was a
Certainly
very,
not for the last 25 years. But and the other question was, would it be more cost effective? We don't really even have that answer, so. Counselor McGivern.
The way I see this, and all the points are good points, and there's a lot more that needs to be done here. A lot more that is not, certainly under the purview of the city council to question it. But we have a rate schedule that is archaic. There are rates there that are $1. Cost of postage is more than $1. It costs more to bill them than we're charging them to do the job itself. It's Stop and Shop is going to. They're broken down into categories. Whether it's by if it's liquid, it's broken down to to 4 different categories. For scales, it's broken down to the amount of scales. The Stop and Shop is going to pay a lot more. Again, if you look at surrounding communities, the proposed rates are closer to what surrounding communities are doing. Is it going to completely clear the deficiency in what we're being charged by the state? No, I'd rather we went back to a part-time person and made a rate, schedule that pays for the person without making money, but just enough to make sure the job is done. But raising the rates at this is an incremental raise that will close the gap of the money that we're losing. We're not going to, they're not unfair. They're lower than the state average. They're lower than a lot of communities, but it's a step in the direction of where we want to be. So if you look at it as an incremental increase, we'll get some feedback from our businesses out there. Is one of these rates off maybe? I don't think so. I think we can argue any one of those rates on that proposed scale, but it will close the gap of what we're doing and losing money the way it's being done now. This isn't the DPW's responsibility. This isn't the building department's responsibility. The treasurer probably has no idea what a weight and scale, I shouldn't say it that way, but, have no idea what this is about, This is a specialty, something that we don't think about, but very important task that needs to be performed. And if we're going to continue to do it with the state, our rates, or no matter how we perform the task, our rates have to get closer to paying for the person or persons who are performing the duty.
Thank you.
Well,
Council Bartley.
yeah, I all good points, all make sense, but again, it comes down to nothing but guesswork. I think if we spend a little bit of time, Madam Chair, I will happily work with our administrative assistant and the DPW superintendent over the course of the next month and a half. I'll put together something with them to try to get some kind of a rational basis for our numbers on this. To say that it's not my job, wow. That's nothing anyone in this room. But to come out and say, hey, that ain't my job, wow, that's a classic government cop-out, isn't it? Not my job. I worked 18 years for the Commonwealth. I heard that more than once. And that, now I'm getting that from not one but 2 department heads. It's not my job. When they were in here before, and they were happy to do it. And by the way, they promised us they would look into it and come back to us with an explanation. And now on the day of a hearing, we say it's not my job. Madam Chair, I'll assume responsibility. So I'm going to make, after everybody's done speaking, I won't do it second because somebody else wants to speak. But I will happily do this. I'll ask Ryan's help. I know he'll help me, and I'll work with this DPW superintendent, assuming I can get some cooperation. If I don't have to make another FOIA request, I can just get normal communication on this, and just from department heads, I'll come up with something, and we'll pass it back to this committee. So
Counselor-
I just assume table it. Thank you.
Okay. Counselor Lisi?
Thanks. I'll just say, one more time for the record, that there's nothing irrational about the numbers, and that the numbers are rational because there's been a survey done of the state, surrounding communities, and there's a proposal there that, again, is below the state average and in line with what surrounding communities are charging. It's a market-based and rational proposal that we have before us, and I think that. We did have department heads do a lot of volunteer work on their own free time, and then it was rejected. So it becomes, I think, at some point unclear, like what exactly you want from folks. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. So my recollection of our last meeting, I will recognize him, was that we gained some initial information and we were looking forward to some follow-up. And that's my recollection of where we were, and my hope was that we would finish it up tonight. But are some remaining questions. Counselor McGivern?
Well, there's some assumptions being made here this evening, which I think, and I'll be real quick, but, was Mr. McManus invited to be here this evening?
I don't.
Okay. Was Mr. Cody invited to be here this evening?
Well, they were aware, as far as I know. I would have to ask.
I'm just asking, because
I would have to ask.
I'm the one that said it's not their job, being it's not in their job description to do this job, is what I said. The mayor has got the DPW billing. He doesn't have the DPW doing the work performance that's required to do sealing of weights and measures. He's got the state doing it, an offer that the state does this for other communities. It's not unprecedented. The state does it because it has to get done. I'm suggesting, and if anybody wants to take this further, that's great, but why would we table taking an incremental step towards getting money that is documented by the bills we get from the state, documented by job is being performed, and a vendor out there is needed to have their scales, their cash registers, their gas pumps calibrated. And we should be charging something that's more appropriate. I agree with Councilor Lisi. We have a comparison table. We're not out of whack here. Our existing schedule is out of whack. It's irrational not to change an existing schedule that has not been amended since 1972. Let's take a step forward.
I'm asking Ryan about your question because I don't know the answer to it. I assume he was notified because he answered saying he wouldn't be here. So that would indicate to me notification. And the answer I'm getting is yes. So,
One last comment.
Counselor Murphy.
Yeah, and again, I'm for raising the rates, but I don't want to raise, I would love to know how much we take in on each of those things now, so that when we in fact do raise the rates, and maybe the rates that are being proposed are going to do it, that we do cover the full. I don't want to cover 15,000 if I can cover 18,000. If I know what we're taking in now, specifically in each of the various charges, and I know that if we had the same number and that if we raise these rates to this amount, we are going to end up clearing, if it's $18,000, that we're clearing $18,000. I don't think we should take a deficiency, and I mean, we should change the rates, but I think I would like to get within the next month that we get one, we know this calculation works, and if we do this rate increase, we are going to take in $18,000 or slightly more than $18,000. And/or why aren't we taking in that amount of money?
All right, so.
Can I just respond to that?
Sure, Counselor Lisi.
Thanks. It makes sense. I think the only flaw in the logic there is that when we have the state coming in, the state is charging state rates, and they're going to be rates that are closer to Boston, and they're going to be charging somebody who has probably a higher level of training and expertise to have a state level position than what we would need to hire somebody locally or in some sort of like, part-time arrangement. So I don't think we necessarily need to be setting rates to meet the amount that we're being charged by the state at this point in time. I think we need to raise the rates so that we can develop a market-based rate, what our neighboring communities are, or that's more in line with what our neighboring communities are charging, and then gain some, footing of our own to get out from this situation with the state where we're always going to be falling short and with a gap because we're paying a state certified so-and-so as opposed to somebody local or part-time.
So I'll be the rep.
Come on, Rebecca.
So I feel that, the urgency on the part of some to get it answered tonight. I hear the questions that we had at the last meeting that we didn't get answered for this meeting. So I think we all have made our points. For myself, I would like to entertain a motion on this matter.
Motion table.
And
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
So what I would request is that those who have volunteered to follow up on this would make the information available for our next meeting so that we can move forward. But I hear the questions. So the questions I've heard are people just want a summary on what are we billing, what are we taking in, what are we paying?
And can we
To
have
get
Brian-
a sense of it and perhaps how long we've been doing it this way. I think it's been going on for a while.
Can we
The
have-
rest of it's in the mayor's purview.
Can we have Brian give us a copy of all those rates that you just got there from Councilman Gibbon?
I think we did have them last time, but he can provide us with this,
Yeah.
the comparison,
Yeah.
and the recommendation. This one I cannot read. It's so,
Well,
The first sheet is from Damien.
I would just like the rate schedule,
one
and then
that
what I'd like to
says-
do
The
is find
proposed
out how
rates.
many we get
Yeah.
for each one.
amended 1972.
Yeah, I wrote the 1972 after
Right,
someone
right.
said
So I
it,
just-
but
just
the
so-
proposed rates are from Damien. I don't know if he worked with Mike on that. The other thing we have to talk about is, one of the things that Mike McManus said is he sends out the bill, but there's no demand notice, and there's no follow-up on who pays and who doesn't pay. And there's no mechanism to tack on, a penalty.
Joe, you're right. So we're gonna figure out the process and procedure, and we'll circle back in a month. You don't know it, I don't know it. I don't even know if McManus knows it.
Well,
I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you, David, at
so,
all.
let's just
What
take-
what I'm saying, though, is we know we're getting billed from the state, and every time we table this, we lose money.
I agree with you, Joe,
Well,
but
right.
it's a month. I mean, let's just
Right.
figure it out. I mean, I'm on it.
It's an annual bill. Hey, good luck with you.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully I have to pick it for you.
'Cause I knew what it took just to get this information.
moving right along. This is why I never take bets on how long a meeting will last.
So on the motion to table?
Number 8, please.
On the motion to table, all in favor?
Aye.
Vote for it, right?
We did, and hear back at the next meeting. You're right, we did. Okay.
Number 8, please.
All in favor? Aye. Item 8, filed by Counselor Murphy, ordered that the contract with Zip Cars be reviewed to determine why the city is not receiving any revenue from this enterprise and what can be changed to make sure the city receives an appropriate payment for allowing this company's special parking privileges downtown.
So,
Counselor,
do
Murphy,
we
do we have a contract?
Do we have a copy of the contract?
I don't have a copy before you, unfortunately. I haven't sent it. I do have a signed copy. It looks like the contract was signed in 2014. First thing tomorrow morning, I can send out to the committee so that you have a copy as well. We do not receive revenue from Zipcar. Instead, they provide us service. So they provide a discount to various people for their service. They provide the 2 cars for the city to use. Not the city for free, but they provide their service to the city. We don't charge a fee to them. Other municipalities have, and in early communications back in 2016, I believe, it was determined that the benefit of, city employees are able to use it at a discount, and the benefit that we were seeing from employees using it was much greater than some of the surrounding communities were getting in fees. So, for instance, in 2016, I think they looked into it, and Northampton was charging like $50. And at the time, Economic Development was using one of the cars, and they were seeing a benefit of a couple $1,000s. By not having to use a city vehicle, they were able to use Zipcar at a discounted rate. So you'll see in the contract those benefits that the city is able to utilize, as well as some of the citizens. There was a thought back when this was coming into fruition of moving the spaces into the garages, I believe, and there was a veto and an override of that veto, and the mayor's veto actually is very detailed, and I can have Ryan dig that out for you all, which kind of goes into the various benefits and why we chose the service and why it's where it is.
And
Counselor McGivern?
Just,
that's okay.
am I jumping in?
No, you're good.
No, not, I don't think so.
I know we're revisiting this, but I want to remind everyone that, good example, this evening, 2 handicap placard signs, designated parking. We've been told, that under state statute, we cannot designate parking for any individual, period.
Correct,
State law.
correct.
You can designate general, certain types of parking, as we did on this very valuable strip of parking for the old fire headquarters, which now is a beautiful building with a lot of good things going on there between HCC, between the Pioneer Valley, the Transit Authority, and I think it's great, but parking is a premium, and it takes parking away in the back from businesses on High Street, and this parking on Maple Street was designated for that building. We have, 15-minute parking for when there was a coffee shop there. We have hourly parking, for when people are coming and going, maybe taking a class. Nighttime, is fine, but, certainly those spaces are always filled. We do not have an ordinance for Zipcar to be in those 2 spaces.
No, we do not.
Because we denied it.
Correct,
They are there illegally, as far as I'm concerned.
correct.
A contract does not supersede a city ordinance when it comes to parking on the street.
Right.
And state law backs us up on this, and I've never had an answer to that question, so I'm not asking it, I'm just stating the facts.
And I agree completely. Thank you. Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, just to suspend your rules to the law department. So, Crystal, you indicated that it was a very detailed veto by the mayor. So you just said that. In that veto, did he address the fact that it's contrary to state law?
No.
So, okay, so why not? You read his veto.
I did. I'm not the mayor. I can't tell you why he didn't address that, probably because he's not an attorney.
Okay, but so I know, but you just made an affirmative statement as if the mayor's veto being very detailed should suffice. It almost sounded like that.
No,
But-
I'm just saying it provides some, so rather than, if you didn't want to read the contract in full, because, the contracts are lengthy, the mayor also details the
Gist.
benefits that the contract delineates.
I'll happily read the contract in full. In fact, if we had it in a timely fashion, I would dare anybody, once they get to 2 contracts for Mr. Casey, to try to understand what those were trying to deliver, prepared by, I assume, this law department. But I'll happily read. Who are they prepared by?
I am unsure at this time.
Oh,
Okay, so that'll be a separate.
Different topic. We're talking about Zipcar.
right.
Okay, well, right, so different topic, but that'll be a separate order, so coming attraction as opposed to my other 3 orders relative to this. Wow, okay, that's an amazing omission. Okay, so it's contrary to state law. We'll ask Mr. Ryan Allen to procure the detailed veto. I don't think we need a motion for that, Madam Chair, because Ryan will just comply
Right.
with it. So, yeah, and especially for the counselors that weren't here, this is a very contentious issue, and I'm glad Councilor McGivern raised it. I can see Councilor McGivern's getting his Irish up like I am relative to this, because. Well, Councilor Bartley wasn't too happy at the time either, I can assure you, and neither was
We
our.
were pretty unified, actually, on that.
I mean, it's quite unbelievable, but I guess through the chair to the law department, this is incredible. You said it's a benefit to city employees. Is that benefit delineated anywhere? And if so, where?
It's in the contract. It spells out what the benefits
Wait a minute,
are
wait a minute, wait a
available.
minute.
It also spells out what the benefits are to the citizens. And
Time out for sports. Do the are the city employees aware of that? Do they all have copies of the contract?
I don't know if every city employee has every copy of the contract. It's from 2014.
Can we just
so-
give a straight answer? The answer is no. The answer is no. They don't have a copy of it. So you just said to me that's a benefit for all city employees. You mentioned one city department. I'm not shocked you mentioned OPED, who's where it is. But you just said it's a benefit to all city employees. So the straight answer would be no. No city employee is aware of this benefit because no city employee has seen the contract. That's the answer. You didn't give that answer. I would appreciate if you did, but you didn't. That's okay. We'll move on. But that's amazing. Other municipalities charge fees. Which other municipalities charge fees?
The only one I know of is Northampton from the emails that I found from when this contract was being developed.
What fees are they charging?
I believe in 2016, Northampton was charging around $50.
$50.
Month?
I don't know if it was per space or
If I can, the last
Monthly,
I
et cetera.
saw, and then Northampton was charging $1,500 now.
$1,500.
A year?
Yep.
And just through the chair to the law department. Where are the cars parked in Northampton?
I
Zip
don't know
cars?
that information.
I believe they're behind.
Okay, so we have a mayoral veto that does not address state law. We have a municipal benefit for city employees that, other than OPED, my guess is no other city employee is aware of the municipal benefit. I mean, guys, I hope this is like government that's run amok. I mean, there's no transparency whatsoever, none. I mean, this is from our law department. A municipal benefit employee that no employee of the government knows it exists because the law department just says it's in a private contract, or actually it's a public contract that no employee's ever seen. I mean, Madam Chair, this is a new standard for city government, and I'm not picking any department, and I apologize for if anybody feels that way, because I sincerely apologize. I'm just mystified by this, because this is an act, Madam Chair, that we've seen before. Thank you.
So we are getting the copy of the contract sent to Ryan, so
And it's Ryan to
so
distribute.
he'll distribute it to the committee? Okay. And Council Murphy?
Yeah, so let me go two areas here. So related, and I'm asking you, and you may not be able to give me an opinion right now, but so if state law prohibits us from providing this parking for this particular company without an ordinance, or if it
Period.
if it appears, Councilman McGivern, if he's correct that we can't do that at all, then would a contract that attempts to do that be an invalid contract by state law?
I'd have to look at why these are available. I mean, Zipcar is not a novelty by any means. Many municipalities use them. So I'd have to look into how they're getting around state law if state law is not allowing that.
Well, I
So
would
do you want to make that as a motion?
Yes, I would certainly make that as a motion that we ask for a legal opinion as to how this contract is valid if state law prohibits us from doing that for a private entity. And the second part, as I looked at this, I'm thinking when the contract was approved, that Zipcar at that point was considered a nonprofit entity, and that Zipcar is now a for-profit entity. At least that's the reading that I've done, and so are we now providing, if in fact this contract is legal, which I would want to verify that it is, and I have reservations that it is. Was it originally done because it was a nonprofit, and now we are letting this company make money by having our spots, and what is the city getting out of that? So those are, I mean, my first concern is that someone gets a contract and they don't pay anything to get it, number one. Number two, my second concern goes along with Councilor McGivern and obviously the other councilors here, that are we legally allowed to have a private entity have parking spaces, prime parking spaces, as Councilor McGivern has said? And then if in fact we can, then to me, the city should be getting some money from that, and not just a benefit to some or others. And then the other question would be, so if I'm a city employee and I go to Zipcar, am I getting a discount, or is the city getting billed? I don't quite understand, but I'll look at the contract when we get that. But there's a lot of concerns that I have, and my number one concern is that, that we do things the right way, and we do things legally.
Counselor Anderson Burgos.
So it's not a nonprofit. It was purchased in 2014 by Ava's budget. Am I right?
I don't know that. I don't know the inner workings of Zipcar
That's
right
not,
now.
that's not a nonprofit.
Avis? Negative, correct, sir.
Right, so
Correct, sir.
this is not a nonprofit. It was purchased,
Well, and
It
it
was
kind of
per-
wouldn't
That's
matter
great.
if it was.
it was,
Research.
it was purchased on March 14, 2013. Ava's Budget Group purchased
Makes it even more
Zipcar
funny.
for approximately $500 million in cash, making Zipcar a subsidiary.
Oh, sir, Anderson, Virgos, on point. I'm
So
digging it.
it's not a nonprofit. So we need to look at that contract. Sorry.
Okay,
Oh,
so.
don't be sorry, that's
so
a great point.
We have a motion be made. Oh, Counselor McGivern.
Question to the law department too, just to check on too, because, sale and lease of property, negotiated by the mayor, I understand, does come to the city council. If there's a contract for the leasing of two properties, two public, parking spaces, the city council has never voted on the contract. I think we even voted on Valley Bike's contract, which we all agreed is not for profit.
Right.
And serves a benefit, except where they block the sidewalk, but it's a different issue.
Yeah, and just, Councilor I'm sorry.
Councilor
Councilor
Barley.
McGivern is absolutely right. So we passed that, as you recall, Madam Chair, in response to what happened with the issue over.
Geriatric.
Well, Lynch School. So that was part of it as well, when we were, and then geriatrics too. So we had private vendors getting leases for public ways, but we stopped that. Fortunately, not completely, but I just want to make a friendly amendment to Councilor Murphy's. So invalid, so in the legal terms, would the contract be void or voidable? That's really what a lawyer would look at. So they don't say invalid. Is the contract void or voidable based upon the criteria you laid out as first enunciated by Councilor McGivern? So that's the motion.
I'll second that amendment.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the motion is that we ask our legal department to provide a legal opinion relative to the state law that we understand to prohibit designating parking to a company, and that if that is the case, can a city contract supersede that state law, or is the contract void or voidable?
Yeah, pretty
If
much.
it
That sums it up.
does not.
That sums it up.
And I would like that report for our next ordinance committee meeting if possible.
And is it doable, Crystal, to have that by our next ordinance committee meeting? Or do you need a month, or?
I mean, you can put it on for 2 weeks and I'll see if I can get it put together.
Okay, so then, I believe it would be in order to table this till we can receive that?
Yeah.
Is there a
Thank you.
second?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we're tabling it to receive info and legal opinion. And we can just move it forward a little, Crystal, if for some reason you need more time. I don't know,
We're
it's not an
meeting until
emergency.
November 19th, so, I mean, the full city council.
Right,
So,
I'm sorry?
In 2 weeks.
We have a meeting next week
Yeah,
at 6 o'clock.
Oh, not the next
Right
one. No,
now.
that's ridiculous. But the
It's at
22nd.
6 o'clock
Yeah, not
before
that
the
one,
city
not that
council
one.
meeting.
but a couple.
Our next ordinance committee meeting is at 6 o'clock next this coming Tuesday, before city council meeting.
That's for public
Because of
hearings.
the mess up with the newspaper with the
Right.
public hearings.
Yes.
So that's our next meeting.
So Councilor Murphy's
Yeah.
motion was to get a report back for the October 22nd meeting.
Yeah, for later, yeah, for 2 or 3 weeks. or
That's-
Whatever. I'm certainly not trying to get it.
Right, so that, we're not trying to press you to next Tuesday.
So motion to take number 9 off the table?
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 9, filed by Counselor Lisi, ordered that section 62-37, hours of operation for peddlers and/or solicitors be amended. My recollection of this order was that we had authorized people to have permits, and then it was pointed out to us that they actually exceeded the ordinance hours. So Counselor Lisi filed it so that because it seemed practical, what we had approved, but then again, we were creating a problem. So the idea is to make our ordinance come into compliance with the practicality of what people are doing.
I'll make a motion that we just put this into legal form for,
Right,
I
but
think that's,
What are the
I don't
hours?
have specific hours with this order that we would be amending them to. Is Counselor Lisi still here?
no. but-
She's
No,
here
but it's a good order.
somewhere.
I think we should put it.
Right, right, but I mean, does somebody have a good working recollection of
the hours.
what the window of hours is that we've been approving so that we could state it properly?
Yeah,
I don't know if legal has that, or,
There was a question, there was a question of whether there was a federal regulation of when they could be out soliciting. And I came across all sorts of various hours that other municipalities use. I didn't see a federal regulation for solicitation. It seems to be municipal regulated. So it's just determining, based on people we've already permitted, kind of what hours we want to do, whether it's, dawn to dusk or we,
right, and I couldn't remember, because I know we've set some specific times, and I seem to remember 8 PM, but then I was thinking there might have been a couple that wanted to go later that we set 9 PM at. And so I didn't want to amend it again and then still have a problem.
there's something to consider as far as peddlers and solicitors. I believe that also qualifies as door to door, so thinking of.
So
how
we
they
need to
want
be a
people
little
to
bit
knock on
careful,
your
right?
door.
right.
So, does any committee member remember an hour after 8 PM?
I don't. And if we did, it would have to be by special permit anyhow, so
Does that seem reasonable from what you
So I mean, the
saw?
other option is that we had discussed the language as far as making it so that it was done by special permit.
So don't set a time.
So maybe not set hours and instead put language in that states the hours would be set via special permit application to city
Okay.
council or something along those lines. So that way we're not making
Okay,
it so anyone's out of compliance and we're not having to fix these hours as problems arise.
okay, so set hours as per special permit condition.
So I'll make a motion that we approve this pending review of legal form by the city solicitor, and we'll look at legal form, I don't know, 2 weeks or 4 weeks, whenever she can pull it together.
Okay. Oh, that sounds great. I was, yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. So then we deal with the specific case.
right.
We gotta look at a committee.
You know,
But I
certain
think our
areas, maybe you
current
can't do that.
ordinance does say 6 o'clock or something arbitrary.
Oh,
But,
no,
and this would remove that and substitute
I'm not gonna
this.
doors past 6 o'clock. I don't wanna be, shut out.
So,
Not much,
did you
but-
second
Yep,
his
second, yep.
motion?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, Crystal, that's very helpful. I think you had said that before, and I had just sort of lost track of that.
Did we approve number 1 minutes?
We didn't
No,
have
we
them
didn't have
yet.
it. Didn't have it, so it
Ryan's
just
just
stays on
buttoning
table.
them up.
Okay.
So I didn't take it up.
So motion to
So-
adjourn, I think, would be in order.
So, but for item 9, so we have approved the amendment and we're waiting for legal form
Correct.
at the next meeting, so
Oh,
it's
whenever she works.
so it's technically tabled, waiting for the legal,
Okay.
right?
So I'll make a motion to table pending legal form.
Yeah, all right. And that was seconded, and all in favor?
Aye.
And now a motion.
Just to be clear.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And a motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Carrie, I, we've been all on for that order. I just was so, it just wasn't.